Star Trek's most noble crossover is the real-world fight against this terrible disease. For nearly 60 years, Star Trek has inspired millions with its vision of a better future, one driven by exploration, peace, and the indomitable spirit of cooperation. It's a franchise that has united generations under the dream of what humanity could be. But sometimes, the noblest voyages are the ones that don't happen on a starship, and the most meaningful crossovers aren't between characters on screen, but between fiction and reality. Perhaps the most heartfelt example of that is Star Trek's involvement in the real-world fight against a terrible disease, owls, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. In the face of this devastating condition, members of the Star Trek family, actors, writers, fans, and even Starfleet itself have united across decades to raise awareness, funding, and hope. This deeply human crossover, one between science fiction and medical science, shows that the optimism of Star Trek isn't just a story, it's a call to action. A tragic diagnosis, a community's response. The story begins with one of Star Trek's own, Michael Okuda, a legendary graphic designer and technical consultant who helped define the look and feel of Star Trek from the next generation onward. In 2023, Okuda publicly revealed that his wife, Denise Okuda, a fellow designer and key figure behind the visual identity of Star Trek, had been diagnosed with ALS. For those unfamiliar, ALS amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is a progressive neurodegenerative disease that affects nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord. It gradually robs people of their ability to move, speak, and eventually breathe. The Okudas are titans in the world of Star Trek. They created the LCARS computer interfaces that fans instantly recognize. They wrote technical manuals that turned fictional starships into believable blueprints. Their fingerprints are on nearly every screen and panel in the Star Trek universe. So when the community learned of Denise's diagnosis, the response was immediate and profound. Fans, cast members, and even production teams from Star Trek, Picard, and Strange New Worlds reached out in support. Fundraisers were organized. Social media buzzed with tributes and awareness campaigns. The Star Trek community, so often engaged in discussing warp cores and temporal paradoxes, turned its attention to something far more urgent, real-world compassion. The Walk to Defeat ALS becomes a Starfleet mission. In a remarkable show of unity, several Star Trek cast members and crew formed teams to participate in the ALS Association's annual Walk to Defeat ALS. Cast members from various shows, including The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, used their platforms to encourage donations and raise awareness. Jonathan Frakes, whose own brother Daniel died from pancreatic cancer, has long been involved in health-related causes. He became one of the most vocal supporters of the ALS cause, rallying fans and colleagues to contribute to the fight. Gates McFadden, Marina Sirtis, and LeVar Burton also offered their voices to promote action, showing that the spirit of Starfleet's values isn't limited to scripted episodes, it lives in the people who brought those characters to life. In one memorable event, the Okudas appeared virtually at the Walk to Defeat ALS, with Denise expressing gratitude and determination. "I've always believed in the vision of Star Trek," she said. "A future where we solve problems with intelligence, kindness, and unity. That future starts with how we treat each other now." Star Trek fandom turns its power toward advocacy. Star Trek has always inspired active, passionate fans, people who don't just watch the shows but immerse themselves in its philosophies. The ALS fight became a rallying cry for fan organizations such as Starfleet International, the world's largest Star Trek fan club. Chapters across the globe organized fundraising events, charity auctions, and educational webinars about ALS. At Star Trek conventions, panels once reserved for discussing Romulan politics or starship schematics began including segments on real-world medical science. Scientists and neurologists joined cosplayers on stage to talk about the progress being made toward understanding and curing ALS. In one particularly moving moment at STLV 2024, a scientist working on ALS treatments revealed she was inspired to pursue medical research after watching Star Trek Voyager as a child. The fandom's collective energy became something more than enthusiasm, it became a force for good. The same imagination that dreamed of dilithium and tricorders was now dreaming of neuroprotective therapies and gene editing. The Federation's philosophy in action, Star Trek has always championed values like diversity, empathy, and scientific advancement. The show's optimistic future is one where diseases like ALS are conquered, where suffering is minimized by compassion and progress. When the Star Trek community threw its weight behind ALS advocacy, it was living those values. It's easy to watch Star Trek and admire its future. It's harder and far more noble to try to build that future now. This crossover between Star Trek and ALS activism is not just symbolic, it's tangible. Money raised by fans and celebrities alike is funding cutting-edge research into potential treatments. Awareness spread by those who wear Starfleet uniforms has helped more people recognize early symptoms, seek diagnosis, and find support. The conversation is shifting, and Star Trek is part of that momentum. No one fights alone. A message from the bridge. In the Star Trek Picard episode, The Impossible Box, Jean-Luc Picard says, "We're stronger together." That line has taken on new meaning for those fighting ALS. Support groups for ALS patients now include fans who bonded over Star Trek, some of whom are themselves battling the disease or caring for someone who is. Shared Fandom has become a support structure, complete with Vulcan salutes, Federation flags, and digital meetups on Zoom. Michael and Denise Okuda, despite the hardships they face, have used their platform to educate others about ALS, providing updates, guidance, and encouragement. They have become the real-life embodiment of Starfleet officers, courageous, honorable, and endlessly giving. When a fan tweeted that Denise Okuda was the soul of the Enterprise, hundreds echoed the sentiment. She and Michael have helped shape how the world sees Star Trek, and now the world is seeing them, not just as artists, but as heroes. Fiction can't cure disease, but it can fuel hope. ALS is a cruel disease. It strips away movement, speech, and independence. But what it can't take is hope, and hope has always been Star Trek's most powerful force. In a very real sense, Star Trek's dream of a better future is being tested right now, not by a fictional war or galactic catastrophe, but by a neurodegenerative disease. The response from the community shows that optimism isn't naive, it's necessary. And it works. Doctors and scientists, many of whom were inspired by the franchise, are working harder than ever to find a cure. New technologies in gene therapy, AI-assisted diagnostics, and stem cell research are offering fresh hope. These are real-world counterparts to the fictional miracles of Star Trek sickbays. And thanks to increased funding and attention driven by advocacy, the timeline toward treatment is accelerating. A legacy beyond the screen. When future generations look back at Star Trek, they'll remember the iconic moments, live long and prosper, resistance is futile, and engage. But they may also remember something more profound, that in our time, the Star Trek family came,